Hello and welcome to this video channel entitled The Climate Emergency and Spiritual Values. This is program one of a whole series of programs. If you're concerned about our response to the climate emergency and your future and the future of your children, grandchildren, you've come to the right place. Well, who am I to talk about the climate emergency? Well, I'm Chris Philpott, I'm 70 and I'm a concerned citizen. I'm concerned about the future of my children and grandchildren. I'm concerned about the collective response to the climate emergency. I'm worried that Homo sapiens, our species, may die out and cockroaches will inherit the earth. Now, I'm not a scientist or expert. I've just had a career in education and I've been a green activist for 39 years. Making this video channel is part of my activism, but also writing books. I've written this book on green spirituality, for instance, to talk about spiritual values and the environment. Who am I to stand here and talk about spiritual traditions? Well, the book I've just mentioned, I spent 13 years of my life researching 12 different spiritual traditions. As you can see, this book, Green Spirituality. Also, I tried to get some practical experience of at least 6 spiritual traditions in India. In 2002, I went there asking different spiritual traditions about their attitude and spiritual teachings towards the environment, including a mention of climate change, which was very early there coming to people's consciousness. Well, why India? Well, when you think about it, 4 major religions have come out of India. Buddhism started in India. Jainism started almost the same time. Of course, Hinduism has been the native religion of India for thousands of years. And of course, the most recent religion to come out, some people say an offshoot of Hinduism, but it's quite different and distinctive, is Sikhism. So I knew there was a repository of knowledge there in those 4 religions, but also Christianity has a long history. Not long after Christ, Christianity came to India, and Islam has had a long tradition as well. And we must remember there's 600 million Muslims in India. When we think of India, I arrived there in 2002, I thought I'd gone to a different planet, because us in the developed world, lots of wealth, things you take for granted like the health service, unemployment benefit. There's none of that in India. Well, there wasn't then, and people told me in Delhi there's 50,000 people a day turning up as labourers or whatever to find work. So the first thing to understand about India, it's very poor. Not all of it, but some of it is poor. And you can see from this picture of a beggar, these are the first people you meet as a Westerner. And there are many beggars. And I had to decide very early on who I was going to give money to. It wasn't the women in Delhi who hired a baby for a day and thrust them at you and said, give money for the baby. It was old people and people who were thrown out of their houses to get some money, couldn't earn any money, or people who were obviously disabled. At one place in Ajmer, I went to a Sufi shrine. There were so many beggars, I ran out of money to give to them. They're all disabled. So that's another area that we must look at. People are poor. You can see from this slum, the picture of a slum by the side of a railway in Mumbai. In fact, Mumbai has one of the biggest slums in the world. You can see there's poverty because there's pigs in the street eating rubbish. This was in the middle of Rishikesh, these pigs. In the countryside, they have cow dung for fuel, as you can see from this picture. They use animals a lot, not lots of modern farming equipment all over the place with tractors. And the cities, as you can see from these two pictures, are crowded. The urban landscape is crowded. But apart from all this, it is a spiritual country. There are very good spiritual leaders there, as I found from my 130 interviews with them. I went there and I was invited automatically by Mahavinder Singh to an environmental conference in Delhi, as you can see from this photograph. They were concerned about biodiversity in the Punjab, species dying off, and they wanted to do something about it. So it's both environmental awareness and spiritual awareness. So, I interviewed 6 leaders of 6 different spiritual traditions. In Dharamsala, I interviewed Lobsang Geshe Drapka, a Tibetan Buddhist who'd come from Tibet in 1991. For instance, in Rishikesh, I was at Shivananda Ashram, and here you can see me with Swami Dharamanda, interviewing them about Hinduism. In Amritsar, I interviewed Sikhs. Here you can see me with Mahavinder Singh, a Sikh who was explaining how he follows Sikhism in his life. I interviewed people in other parts of the country with different traditions. In Delhi, I interviewed Mahmood Waduddin, who's a famous Islamic scholar, which we mentioned later on in Delhi. There are many Sufi shrines in Delhi. In Ahmedabad, I interviewed Jains, and here I am with Acharya Sri Mahaprajna, head of the Jain Paratherapanth sect. I was there at Mahavira's birthday and there were 10,000 Jains there. I interviewed Christians, and here I am at Bangalore Monastery, Benedictine Monastery, with Father Jerome. They had a farm, they had a clinic, and I found Christianity very inspiring in the south of India. So I followed interviews in the main religions. And now I'm going to show you the route I took through India and each town associated with it, with different spiritual traditions. So I started off in New Delhi, interviewing Muslims and Christians. Then I went to Amritsar, which of course is the centre of Sikhism. This is where the Golden Temple is. Then I went up, you can see from the map, to Dharamsala, where the Tibetan Buddhists are and where the Dalai Lama lives when he was exiled from Tibet. I went down to Rishikesh and then on to Varanasi. These are great Hindu centres. Then on to Bodh Gaya, as you can see from the map. That is where Buddhism started, where the Buddha had enlightenment. I was absolutely privileged to meditate in the same place that the Buddha, under the Bodhi tree, where the Buddha gained enlightenment. Then on to Kolkata, and I interviewed Hindus again. Then you can see from the map that I headed south to Hyderabad, interviewed a few Christians there, on down to Pondicherry through to Trivandrum. And in Kerala, the state of Kerala, Trivandrum is at the bottom, as you can see from the map. This is where the Christian heartland of India is, the South Indian Church. And I saw pure Christianity in action in the Kushamala ashram up in the mountains of Kerala. And I met the man, one of the monks. He had nothing. And he was the happiest man I ever met. I couldn't interview him because he was laughing so much and saying how much he loved God. Then on to a big monastery, Sera Monastery, going up the coast there. That is where there's a big Tibetan Buddhist monastery. Up to Mumbai, as you can see from the map, more Muslim shrines, Sufi shrines. Then on to Ahmedabad. Now Ahmedabad is like Amritsar is the centre of Jainism in India, and that's where I interviewed a lot of Jains. Then onwards to Ajmer, which is a Sufi shrine again, a very famous Muslim shrine. Finally, going back towards Delhi, as you can see from the map, to Vrindavan and Mathura. Vrindavan and Mathura associated with Krishna, of course, one of the main saints of Hinduism. Then I went back to Delhi for a few days and I got as many interviews with Christians, Muslims, Buddhists I could, etc. And that was my trip. So I encountered lots of spiritual leaders and got a real insight to all these spiritual traditions. And this is why I can say I have some knowledge. I don't know everything, of course, but I have knowledge and experience. And that's why I wrote the book. This video channel is based on the second book I've written. You can find that on Amazon and details will be shown later on the screen. What we're trying to do with this channel is to educate so that people have the information to make choices. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to make it very understandable with plain English, with good visual content so you can understand. What we're going to do, we're going to look at the climate emergency, the causes, the present effects that around the world, as we've seen with extreme weather, in terms of rainfall. In the UK, we've had flooding regularly, or we've had heat waves. And I'm sure it's in your country you find extreme weather as well. So, we're going to look at the causes and effects, but we're also going to look at the future scenarios, considering what we do now. We've been told by the UN Committee on Climate Change that basically we've got 10 years to really cut our carbon. And they show the scenarios of a 1.5 degree increase or up to 2 degrees maybe. Well, I'll be exploring that on this channel, and also be exploring over 2 degrees, the worst case scenario, so we can prepare for this future. But unlike other channels, we're going to look at the deeper causes of climate change caused by mankind's behavior. And we're going to look at values that drive climate change. We're going to look at spiritual values, because I think part of the problem is we've had guidance for millennia of how to interact with the environment so it's stable and the climate's stable, but we've walked away from them. We've forgotten them. I have some expertise in this area because I've studied a lot of different spiritual traditions. And this book, which I showed you before on green spirituality, I researched for 13 years. You can find more details on my website at greenspirituality.org. This channel is also very different because it has a practical content. It tells you what we can do as individuals. So again, I'm going to draw on my experience of growing organic vegetables with children in schools, and also creating nature reserves, increasing biodiversity. I've created two in 2 different schools. So we're going to look at growing your own food, helping wildlife. But we're also going to look at other aspects of decarbonising your life. We don't have to know everything, but we can find people who can talk about installing solar panels, installing geothermal energy, installing heat exchangers. So we can look at all aspects of our lifestyles that we can cut our carbon. So we don't have to know everything, but we'll find people who do know things and will help you through guidance. Why am I doing this? I repeat, to educate. It's not fame or gain I'm trying to get. I just want a different future. The trouble is, the media is dominated by billionaires who have a vested interest in keeping things business as usual. Many years ago, I wrote a song called "Capitalism is Killing the Earth." And one of the lines is, "Circumvent the media machine." This is circumventing the media machine and telling you information that will be helpful to you that you won't find in the media. So it's a service to people because we're all concerned about the climate emergency. My granddaughter was born only in September, and by the time 2100 comes about, she'll be 80. So she'll be living through it. My children will be living through these changes brought about climate emergency. So we can prepare and work together, collectively and individually, to create a future which is not catastrophic. A future that's full of happiness, community, and full of nature. This is my contribution to that, the media. Thank you.